I was just about to go to bed when I got the call. No caller ID. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear. Hello, there was a moment of silence. Then I heard someone clear their throat. A deep, formal voice spoke. Good evening. Am I speaking to Jake Smith? Yes, you are, I replied, ready to cut the call short, assuming it was another spam call. The voice continued. I'm calling about the caregiver role. For Eldridge House, the words immediately caught my attention. I sat up straight. My fiancé and I were saving for a wedding, and with only 10 months to go, we needed every extra penny we could get. I needed a part-time job fast, but finding a decent job these days was like finding water in the desert. So when I saw the caregiver vacancy pop up online, I applied within 2 minutes. We liked your CV and would like to invite you for an interview, the caller continued. His voice was smooth, almost unnervingly so. It sounded like he could be narrating a meditation video. Would you be free tomorrow morning? 8:30 a.m., to be exact. I'll be there, I replied without hesitation. I was shocked they called me back half an hour after I applied, especially at 11 at night. But I figured they were as desperate for employees as I was for a job. It seemed like a perfect match. The interview was done over Zoom. The next morning I sat at my kitchen table, hunched over my laptop, headphones on as I joined the call. The screen flickered, and a middle-aged man appeared. He introduced himself as Ethan. No last name, just Ethan. Ethan. He looked as professional as he sounded. Slick back dark hair, well-groomed beard, suit and tie. He smiled, but it didn't reach his icy blue eyes. His smile was just a bit too wide, revealing teeth that were unnaturally white, and even like he spent his life perfecting them. He asked all the typical questions. What are your weaknesses? What qualities do you believe are important for a caregiver, and how do you demonstrate them? Why do you think you're a good fit for this position? I answered as best as I could, trying to impress. I asked a few questions too, curious about the lack of information on the care home online. Ethan glanced at me. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes showed a flicker of something surprise. Perhaps, yes. He began, his voice measured and calm. We pride ourselves on maintaining a private and exclusive environment for our residents. Many prefer a more discreet approach, away from public attention. It sounded rehearsed. I ignored the red flags. Money sometimes makes you blind. In the end, I got the job. I started work the next evening. I kissed Emily goodbye and headed out the door. Eldridge House was a 45-minute drive from our home in the middle of nowhere. As I drove through the foggy night, Frank Ocean sang softly on the radio. The road cut through a dense forest of tall pine trees, stretching up to the cloudy sky. All around me was nothing but forest. The care home was at the end of a quiet street in a gated community. It was a small, old-fashioned bungalow with neatly trimmed bushes and colorful flowers on the lawn. I parked, stepped out, and approached the front door. Just as I raised my hand to knock, the door creaked open, revealing a tall man in the dimly lit hallway. "Good evening," Ethan said in that smooth yet hollow voice. "Jake, correct," I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, that's right," I shook his hand. "Nice to meet you." Something about him made me uneasy. "Come in," he stepped aside with an almost mechanical grace. "We've been expecting you. Would you like something to drink? Coffee? Water, no thanks." "I'm good." The door closed behind me with a soft thud. Ethan gestured for me to follow him down a narrow hallway, and with each step, my unease grew. The radio was playing softly in the background, and as I listened, the crackly voice became clearer. "We interrupt our regularly scheduled programming to bring you a special report. We have just received word that Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, has been attacked by Japanese forces. I repeat, Pearl Harbor has been attacked. Ethan must have noticed my curiosity. You're probably wondering why we play old news broadcasts like this one, he said, his voice steady. It's not just for nostalgia. It's about keeping a connection to the past alive, especially for our older residents. Now that he mentioned it, the entire house looked frozen in the past. The living room furniture matched the vintage feel. Plush armchairs with floral upholstery set alongside polished wooden side tables. Framed black and white photographs adorned the walls, capturing memories from a distant past, smiling faces at family gatherings, couples dancing at social events, a little girl building a sandcastle, a ballerina posing on her tiptoes. Even the light fixtures, with their frosted glass shades, seemed from another era. The dim glow added to the cozy yet eerie atmosphere. It looked how you'd expect an old people's home to look. There was only one thing missing. Where are all the residents? I asked. Ethan stopped abruptly. Apart from the ticking of a grandfather clock and the crackle of the fireplace, there was no sound except the news broadcast. He turned to me with that unsettling smile, his eyes cold. I must inform you that this role is quite unique, he cleared his throat. Jake, the resident you'll be providing companionship to, is not a living person. What I stammered. The individual in question is not alive. Well, not in the conventional sense. You will be tasked with watching over their ashes. He continued, this is an afterlife care agency. We care for those society has forgotten. Those who passed away with a dying wish to be remembered and loved from beyond the grave. Many of our clients are people who died alone, with no one to mourn their loss. As he spoke, my gaze drifted to a corner of the room where a small, ornate urn rested on a side table. The client was the ashes in that urn. We're understaffed at the moment, so we've had to outsource some of our work across the country. It's a rather unconventional responsibility, I understand. So if this isn't what you were expecting, it's perfectly. I was already moving towards the door before he finished. Oh, hell no, the pay would be $2,000 per night, he added, stopping me in my tracks. We've already wired tonight's pay to your account. I pulled out my phone and saw the PayPal notification. $2,000 had indeed landed in my account. I didn't even know they had my details. That's how I started looking after MS, Eldridge's ashes. Ethan explained that MS. Eldridge had died of a brain aneurysm. Right in that chair, he pointed. 3 weeks had passed before anyone noticed. The mailman came to deliver a letter, and seeing the unopened mail piling up and smelling the stench of decay, he alerted the police. They found her body slumped in the chair. No one was named in her will. Her only request was for her savings to be invested in her afterlife care and for her ashes to be scattered at a beach. And so here we were. There were rules I had to follow each night. Ethan handed me a document listing them all. Rule 1: ensure all doors and windows are securely locked by midnight. Do not open them until the end of the shift. No exceptions. Rule 2: if you hear crying, remain perfectly still until it passes. Do not, under any circumstances, make a sound. Rule 3: do not sleep on the job. Rule 4: do not look into any mirrors after midnight. Rule 5: do not open the bedroom door at the end of the hallway. You must not break these rules. Jake Ethan finished. For the first time, his smile faded. He was dead serious. Got it, I said. My schedule was the same each night. I polished the tables, vacuumed the carpets, dusted the bookshelves, and played MS. Eldridge's favorite songs on the record player. She loved jazz, so every night I played Take the A Train back to back. For the most part, it was a decent job. With no supervisor, sometimes I just laid on the couch, watching Netflix until sunrise. Then I'd clock out at 7 a.m. Rinse, repeat. I didn't hear the crying until the fourth night. I was alone in the house. I remained as still as a mannequin, my heart pounding in my chest, paralyzed by fear as I heard the sobbing. Ethan had warned me about the crying, but I didn't expect it to actually happen. I strained to listen, but the sound was faint and muffled, like it was coming from inside the walls, almost as though they didn't want anyone to hear. Then the crying grew louder, followed by scratching, nails scratching furiously from inside the walls. That was the last straw. As soon as the crying stopped, I got out of there. I left the house keys under the doormat. My phone rang as I reversed out of the driveway. Ethan must have been alerted that the door was opened. I put it on loudspeaker and pressed the gas pedal. "What are you doing, Jake?" There was no more politeness in Ethan's voice. "I'm quitting. Don't worry, I'll pay back tonight's wage, there's no need. Come back tomorrow night." I hung up and blocked his number. When I got home, I slid into bed, careful not to wake Emily. I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything that happened in my mind. I didn't realize I had fallen asleep until I was jolted awake by the phone ringing again. Emily stirred beside me. This time the call was from my mother. Jake, her voice was trembling. "Ethan's here. He wants to talk to you." My blood turned to ice. Ethan's voice came through the phone. "We had a deal, Jake. You can't quit now. Ms. Eldridge is counting on you." He was in my parents' house. My head spun with panic. I couldn't risk putting my family in danger. "Okay," I stammered. "I'll come back tomorrow night, good. I knew you'd make the right choice." Ethan left my parents' house, but I didn't sleep a wink. The next night, I returned to Eldridge House. When Ethan greeted me at the door, his smile was back, and his eyes held a cold satisfaction. "I'm glad you came back," he said. He handed me a small wooden box. "Place this next to MS. Eldridge's urn and leave it there overnight." "What is it?" I asked. "Her heart," he replied simply.